The Barefoot Punter, because statistics are the best. The Barefoot Punter, because you don't need footwear to bet.
Welcome back to the Barefoot Punter. I'm your host as always, The Mug, your co-host, The Logical One. We take our inspiration from the Barefoot Investor, but instead of giving you investment advice, we're here to give you a bit of betting advice on the NRL and AFL 2021 season. Now, Logical actually isn't here this evening. He's found himself up north, up in Yamba, I believe, Benny, and he's enjoying a bit of time out up there. But great to have you with us. Welcome to the program, to the Pope.
Thanks, Mug. Glad to be here. Yeah, he's gone up there, no Blues Fest, but it sounds like he's making the most of the opportunity up north anyway. So good for Logical One. Hope he's enjoying himself.
Very good, mate. And all things going well, we'll have a little special envelope where we can reveal some of the Logical One's thinking before we get into this weekend. But just to recap this weekend, Benny, what a turn of events in the AFL. We had, after the siren win on the Thursday, we had an absolute fizzer on the Good Friday, which has got people up in arms. Our man Brucey kicked 10. Can you believe that? I think there was a bit in that for Logical, really sticking it to the man there. 10 goals from Brucey. What's going on? Sydney smashed the Tigers. We had Essendon smashing the Saints. West Coast smashed Port, rather. And, of course, Easter Monday, where my mob almost came back and overrun Geelong. But before we get into any sort of NRL chat, was there anything that you saw from the AFL on the weekend yourself, Benny?
The Mug, very outside of view that I'm taking here, but the margins struck me. The one-sided nature, and not just that, but the underdogs winning in these one-sided games, like that I find that quite stark. Like, is there any reason that this has occurred?
It's a tough one. I think you can probably my personal opinion is that at the start of the year, your younger players are a lot fitter and raring and ready to go. I think you get the finals teams that maybe haven't had as good a preparation potentially as some of the other teams that finished earlier, so they've had longer to prepare. And maybe there is a little bit of arrogance creeping in, or it's not as urgent for the teams that know they're good because they know that they're going to win enough games over the journey. So maybe they just aren't quite as hungry as maybe some of those up-and-coming teams. And I think in the AFL, like with the exception of North Melbourne, on any given day, if you're 5-10% off mentally, then you're going to get beat. And I think we definitely saw that with the Saints. They were off mentally, and Essendon tidied them up. It's going to be interesting to see this weekend whether that can be backed up by Essendon. They've what seems to be a pretty tough task now going to Sydney, so we're going to find out. But Benny, mate, you're absolutely flying. Can you just give us a little bit of a quick review of the betting weekend from some of the stuff that you're speaking about on the podcast last week? Because something that's fresh in my mind is Melbourne Storm, but I think you were tipping up some margins in that game. How did that game play out, and where did we end up?
It didn't actually pan out as I expected, the Mug, so Melbourne actually were down 6-0 after 25 minutes, and after starting strongly but not converting into points, they sort of went off the boil for a period of time, and Broncos scored first, and then the last 15 minutes of the first half, as it's sort of well known now, Ryan Papenhuyzen scores 4 tries in 11 minutes to blow that game wide open, and then they ran away with it. But I guess depending which way you look at it, the concerning thing is Melbourne weren't that good. So even though they've walked away 34-point winners, winning 40-6. Like, they sort of, they only played 55 minutes as a touch on. So it's the disparity in the competition, as we said here, is vast at the moment. And that was a bit of a theme over the weekend, that South and Penrith also beat up on weaker opposition. And they also were probably, you wouldn't walk away and say they were overly impressive. So that's a bit of worry. But our bets in that game got up, sort of, but not quite the way I would have expected. I would have expected more of an 80-minute performance from them, but still a big win from them.
Nah, awesome, mate. And you're absolutely on fire with your tip-ups. If you want to get some of the Pope's action, get to the mailbag.com.au because Benny's been tipping up some absolute gold. Another 4 units in the skyrocket over the weekend. So going really well, mate. And some great tip-ups for the listeners on the podcast anyway. So tune in pretty soon. Benny's going to be going through some of his stuff. From an AFL point of view, We spoke about the Lions getting to a price against Collingwood, and they did. Maybe a little bit lucky, but you take that luck any day of the week. We were happy to see how Richmond went against Sydney. Sydney obviously got that one. I was pretty keen on West Coast, Benny at home, and West Coast got the chocolates there. And of course, we spoke about the Hawks. They really were able to come back and get it done against Geelong. Well, not get it done in terms of the win, but definitely cover that line pretty comfortably in the end, which was great for the punters as well.
The other game we talked about was Geelong v Hawthorn on Monday. What I did notice out of that game on Twitter, I think it was the Token King.
The Token King, yeah. Long time listener to the Token King.
The Token King, very critical of Geelong game style and Chris Scott. So a bit of news coming out of that one, and Chris has copped it a bit today, of sort of reading around and listening to a few things. What's the theory here? Like he's a pretty successful coach, I would have thought.
Yeah, he's one of the most successful. I think he actually is the most successful, one of the most successful winning records of all time. So it's hard to knock Geelong's game style. I think it sort of just flew in the face a little bit of what we've seen in the footy so far this year, which is open, free-flowing footy. Geelong just haven't really changed. They're just still playing the same way that they always have, which is kick, 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 kick. Look for an opening once they get sort of past that sort of back of the square, halfway line, and then they look to go forward and spot up Toma on the lead. So, look, I think if you're getting upset about Geelong and the way they play, you probably, they just haven't changed the way they play. So it's been really successful for them. They'll want to tinker with that game plan a little bit, I think, and maybe speed up a little bit, but I don't think we're going to see a vastly different Geelong throughout the course of the season. It's stood up over a long period of time. They probably just need to quicken up a little bit, I think, if they're going to win the flag, which is ultimately what they want to do. But look, I think that's just how they play, and you have to accept it. All right, Benny, we'll have a quick chat about our favourite segment, Bad Beats. What did you see from Bad Beats from an NRL perspective?
The mug, I was scratching my head looking for something in the Bad Beats section for NRL this week, up until yesterday's game. So in a weekend of favourites winning by big margins, we then had a game yesterday where the West Tigers at plus 10.5 were all the value you wanted out of that. So 24-22 with 3 minutes remaining, coming home strong. Parramatta then score a relatively flukish try late with 3 minutes to go, convert, so they go up by 8, but game sort of dead and buried, 2 minutes remaining. West Tigers crossfield kick in their own 10-metre line, sort of relatively pointless, wasn't going to achieve much. Batted back in, lands in the hands of Blake Ferguson. Parramatta winger runs 20 metres, touches down in the corner, and conversion from the sideline then takes it to 40-point margin. So not only if you're on the plus and you had 2 scores remaining with 3 minutes to go, so that's hard done by. Also, Parramatta 1-12 backers, led by 2, about 3 minutes of play remaining in 2 converted tries, chin you there. So very hard done by on 1-12 backers and West Tigers plus.
If you're on the Pies, you could feel pretty harshly done by, I think. The kick after the siren undid them. And then the other one was probably the 40 plus. If you're on 40 plus in the West Coast game, another shot after the siren, pretty junk time goal. Robbie Gray puts it through. That does Robbie Gray things and kicks the goal. So that was probably the other one in the AFL. Well, Benny, it's getting to that time. Are you ready to do some games?
I am the mug. Looking forward to it.
First up on the Thursday night, we're going up to Sydney, and it's the Sydney Swans hosting Essendon. So what a turn of events. 2 great wins from these clubs on the weekend. The Swans have opened up very short, $1.19, and now sitting at around about 28.5 points. So, Benny, I'm not sure I could tip the listeners into 28.5 points, but I tweeted out that premiership price, and I know you had a bit of a question about that as well.
Yeah, having a look today, the mug got $11 for Swans to win the premiership. I know they're 3-0, but it feels like it's shortening. I don't know what they were pre-round 1, but it feels like they've come in a long way in a short period of time.
Yeah, the Blue Mob had them up at 51, if I'm not mistaken, at the start of the year, and I'm sure you could have got it on the fair or elsewhere at a bigger price. So they've come from the clouds. I took a little bit of 17s just as a bit of a saver on the weekend because they, maybe they could get on a roll and they could finish in the 8 and deep in the 8, depending on how the season goes. But $11, I think that's a bit poisonous. I mean, you've got West Coast Dogs sort of sitting around that 9 or 10 mark. So, I know who I'd rather be on around that sort of mark. So I don't think I could be putting the listeners into $11.
Yeah, well, I understand if you beat the Premiers on their home deck that there's going to be some excitement, but it feels like a big move in a short period of time.
A very big move and very long season, as we know, Benny. A lot can change. So we'll jump into the next game. We're flipping over to Friday night, and what a game this is. This produced two absolute rippers last year. Probably two of the best games for the year. I absolutely loved the prelim final between these two teams. Port Adelaide's taking on Richmond. And I guess the opposite of the Friday night game. These are two big losers from the weekend. So they do battle over at the Portress. Port started. You could get some 4.5, and now that market's just drifted out now a little bit to 7.5, which I know Logical said on the program last week that he had Richmond and Port rated equally. So on that, you'd probably say that market now is around about right if you were to give away sort of 8-9 points for home ground advantage to Port Adelaide. So that's probably about right. So look, I don't think any betting here from myself. I am pretty neutral on this one. I don't even have a lean necessarily to one team or the other. I just think it's going to be a great contest. Two teams coming off a loss and really looking forward to it.
One aspect I'd be interested in, am I right in saying Cotchin's in some doubt?
Yeah, but the club has come out and said he's going to be okay. I mean, he's very important, the skip, but probably not as important as what he once was. So, you know, he's an older player. His role's changed a little bit, so I think they can actually cover him.
In betting terms, how important is he? So if he is in or out, what does that do to those prices and the line in that game?
Probably a couple of points, I'd say. Probably 2 points for Koch on the betting line. But as I say, Richmond bat pretty deep. They'll cover him if he's not going to be playing. So Pope, don't have a lot of betting interest in the Dogs Brisbane game. I make it pretty much what it is down there, so I won't be betting in that game. I feel a little bit uncertain about the St Kilda and West Coast game as well. I'm really confused where St Kilda is at with their footy, so I'm going to stay out of that one as well. But the next game I want to talk about is the Suns versus Carlton. Suns here opened up at 3.5 point favourite, and it's just trimmed up a little bit now to 2.5. I tell you, there's one thing that I've really enjoyed about the Suns football this year, and it's their ferocious attack on the football and the way that they're pressuring teams. Now, the Suns aren't a team that a lot of people like to watch, but I was super impressed with them against West Coast in the first round. And if it wasn't for losing the kid, Rao, the super kid, they would have gone a long way to actually going very close to winning that game. Then on the weekend, they played Adelaide, and Adelaide are doing a lot of things right as well at home, and I thought they were super competitive against Adelaide as well. I really like a lot of stuff they're doing. I'm concerned with their two big men being out, so they've lost Day and now they've lost Witts, their ruckman, so that is disappointing for them. But ruckman, I think, is something that can be replaced. And I've absolutely loved the ferocity of the Suns, and Carlton are coming off a pretty soft kill on the weekend. They love drinking a little bit of their own bathwater, the Blues, and they would have celebrated that win. I think emotionally they got themselves up on the weekend for that one. The skipper was right up and about in Cripps, and I can see them having a bit of an emotional letdown come this week. I think the Suns will see this as an absolute game. They're right in it, and I think the talent, I think the ferocious attack from the Suns is going to catch Carlton off guard, and I'm actually pretty excited about the Suns in this one.
That's interesting, the mug. I actually looked at those prices, and I guess you're living down in Melbourne, you're probably over-index on information about Carlton compared to the Suns, but I thought Carlton looked a big price in that one, so that's interesting with your learned perspective that's the way you view it, so really informative.
No worries. Thanks, mate. I'm no guarantee the win. That's just what I like. That's just what I like, Benny. The next game of interest that I wanted to speak about that I've got betting interest in is the D's taking on Geelong. Now, the D's are 3-0, and that's the first time, I think, since 2005, I think I heard on the weekend. So the D's have done all they can do, I guess. They've beaten the teams that have been put up against them. In saying that, the teams that have been put against them haven't been great, and they got GWS on their knees a little bit, losing a couple of players in the run on the weekend. But I think it's worth a shot at margins. I think the D's potentially have the speed and they have the skill to potentially cut up Geelong and hurt them with pace. So if that is to be true, I think it's worth a little dabble at 15 plus, at 21 plus, at maybe 25 plus, or even I've actually had a little dabble at 40 plus at 10s. I just think the D's might be able to slide. I could be wrong, but I think it's worth the push. Just a little go at the margin on the D's to really get a hold of the slow, stagnant Cats. Now, last year the Cats played keepings off against the D's, and it was a bit of a snore fest, and the Cats got up in a close one. But the D's just look a little bit different this year. I'm really happy with what May and Lever are doing down back, and I think Cozzy Pickett adds an absolutely new dimension to their attack, and as we know, their midfield's always been great. So really looking forward to that one, and I think the D's are worth a push at a margin.
That makes sense, Mug. Dangerfield still out too, I'm right in saying. So
he's got another week to go. So and the Cats actually lost key personnel on the weekend. Lost Higgins, so that's another soldier down. So look, Cats have got pretty good depth, but you know, it always starts to challenge you when you start losing these players week after week. So,
and I know that it's a 6-day turnaround from Monday, but still that shorter turnaround is probably a bit of a factor there too, I'm guessing, as well, when you've lost players.
Yeah, look, I don't think, we spoke about this last year, I don't think there's anything majorly statistically sound that actually supports, you know, the 5-6 day turnaround. The 4-day turnaround consistently, or the 5-day turnaround consistently off travel. There is a bit of an argument there. I don't think that will hurt them as much, but yeah, definitely the injuries to Higgins, and we know they've got Cameron on the sidelines already, and Danger's still out. So yeah, and they've just been winning, the Cats. I don't think they're going great. So yeah, as I say, I think it's worth a little push. All right, mate, let's get stuck into some NRL. All right, Pope, here we go. The first game of interest for you, mate, is on the Friday night. It's Panthers taking on the Raiders at home. Panthers here, $1.39, and the Raiders, $3. How do you see this one?
It's a marquee clash, the Mug. So you've got two of the 4 or 5 better teams in the competition playing each other on Friday night at Bluebet Stadium, Panthers home ground. And Penrith have been a regular season behemoth in the last 18 months. Lost one regular season match across 2020 and so far 2021. So it's going to be hard to go against them, but I am in this one.
Right, okay.
Canberra, I've said it in recent weeks, I do like them. And
you like Canberra, don't you? You're a big fan.
Yeah, I do. And they've had a soft start to the year, to be honest, in the first month. They're not playing their best football, but you probably don't want them in the first month either. So I don't think it's the worst sign. This, it's about 7.5, 6.5 the line. The $3 roughly head-to-head. Look, for a team that's top 4, top 5 in the comp, I think this is a big number. They're missing a couple of players, Penrith. Their hooker, Api Coruscant, the feeder of the nut, as has been touched on, is out. And they've also restructured in recent weeks with Crichton going back to fullback with Dylan Edwards, who's been playing really well. He's out. So two of your spine is been reconfigured to suit injuries, and that can have effect in these big games. They haven't really been tested with that as yet. I think they're going to get tested this Friday, and I'm prepared to find out at the $3 how good Canberra are.
Okay, and normally you'd say Penrith pretty solid at the home turf. Storm almost got them, as we know, the other week. So happy to go on the Raiders. And mate, what's the angle there? Are we looking head to head there, or do we take the line? What's the tip up there for the punters?
Bit of both. Generally, I steer clear of the plus these days. The way you would have seen over the weekend, the way some of these scorelines blow out, that it's hard to tip up a plus when momentum goes against you. You almost better back in the head-to-head at the bigger price than taking the plus at $1.90. But when two top 4 or 5 teams play each other, and especially when you've got to start over converted try, I think the plus 6.5, 7.5 is worth it. And also the $3 I think is worth getting involved in and having some interest on the men from the nation's capital.
And I know Logical has often spoken about it, and I've just spoken about it in the Melbourne game. Is there any play there to push a margin with that outsider as well? Is that something that you would look at with your strategy in NRL?
Yeah, and I know at times the Logical one has talked around, especially he taught me a lot, is around the 1 to 39, 40 plus angle, especially, that the value is in that bigger price. And I agree, in similar for NRL, that you'd probably want 13 plus as the angle if you were going to go down that road. I don't think you would in this game. I think Penrith are too good, and if they get beaten, it's not going to be by much, so I wouldn't risk it. But it is definitely an angle for future weeks and other games that those bigger margins, especially 13 plus, is an angle that we'll talk about in other games going forward.
Awesome, mate. That's a great tip up for the listeners. Thank you very much. The next game, mate, that you want to talk about is the Roosters versus the Sharks. And you spoke about the Roosters last week and had another fantastic win on those. So well done on that one. And I'm sure the listeners were very happy with that tip up. So well done again to you, mate. As I said, you're flying. Go to themailbag.com.au. Get all Benny's stuff. He's going really well. Mate, Roosters short in this one as well. $1.39, Sharks $3. How do you see this one?
Again, too short, the favourite in this one, Mug, for me. We talked about last week. I did like the Roosters, but there was the caveat that they are missing their dominant playmaker, Luke Keary, and I think in these bigger games against the better teams, this is when it's going to be found out. And I really rate Cronulla, and there's generally one team early in the year that the market seems to underrate, and I think Cronulla's that team in the NRL this year. They're better than how they're being rated at the moment, and the $3 in this, I can't get this anywhere near minus 7.5, 8, to be honest. Yeah, right. So I really like the Sharks. They're playing good footy. They've, even despite injuries, they're still got a good team on paper, and they've been consistent. Even though they're 2-2, they've put it up to some of the bigger teams in the comp. They're really good value here, both head-to-head and similar line, but I'll be all over this $3 head-to-head.
Yeah, excellent, Benny. All right, mate, that's fantastic. We move on to the next game now, and mate, my eyes nearly popped out of my head when I just checked the prices a second ago, because we've got the Bulldogs hosting the Storm. In this day and age in professional sport, can we have a team that's $1.03? The Storm are $1.03 against the Bulldogs. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's not a mistake. If you just refreshing any betting app and you see $13 Canterbury and you haven't watched any football this year, don't bet into it. But first month of the season as well, you got a $1.03 favourite. It's extraordinary. The line's 27.5 in this, and it might not be enough, to be honest.
Oh, so, really? Melbourne, can you put the punters into Melbourne, though? Can you put the punters in?
I don't know if I can at this stage. If we do, we might be a similar angle that we'd be talking margins from last week. So we're going to be... We might even look at other angles around what Bulldogs do. They haven't scored a point in 3 weeks. So yeah, right. We might be looking at other angles outside of the line that under tries, under points for Bulldogs, big margins for Melbourne is probably the angle, because it's hard to really tip up a 28-point margin, the Mug, for the favourite in this one when they're away from home.
And mate, just for my education, why are I always think rugby league, you bash into each other, it's a pretty simple game. Why are the Bulldogs so bad?
Yeah, we've touched on last week the rule change have had a big difference. So it allows the better teams especially to be able to play more football, throw the ball around, and that's had a dramatic effect. And also there's some really bad management in some of these teams. There's some salary cap disasters occurring across these bottom teams that are haunting them currently and will haunt them for years to come. And this is occurring with the Bulldogs. They've overpaid for players and they're paying the wrong players huge amounts of money, and it's having a disastrous effect. But they're impotent in attack. They are horrendous. I don't know where their next point's coming from, and I doubt it's this weekend. But again, the 27.5, it's a big margin to tip the minus if Bulldogs do somehow score a couple of tries. So we'll look at other angles there.
Is there a danger potentially that Storm rest players, or you wouldn't? That's not something that you would consider, or
it's a good call, because in a high injuries early in the season, it is a factor. But they're actually getting guys back this week who haven't played so far this year. So they've had Harry Grant, who's their star hooker was probably the second best player on the field in the deciding Origin game last year. He comes back after missing the first 4 weeks. They've got Felice Kafusi come back from suspension. I think they'll want to get a bit of rhythm in how they play with their best team on the paddock, so I can't see them resting guys this week.
Okay. Yep. All right, mate. And the last game that we wanted to talk about, Benny, was West Tigers versus the Cowboys. So this, to me, seems like another fairly lopsided affair. We've got $1.35 for the Tigers. Cowboys $3.25. I'm guessing that line's sitting around about 7.5, 8.5. Where are we at here?
And this is a favourites comp at the moment, so high percentage of favourites winning. Again, that occurred on the weekend, 7 out of 8 winning. But I think the Tigers are a bit of a false favourite here. They are at home at their beloved Leichhardt. They aren't a great team, the Mugs, so they're $1.35, 9.5 point favourites here.
9.5, okay.
with much trepidation, I'm going to say the Cowboys are a bet here. And they've been horrible. They've been putrid the last fortnight especially. But 325, they get back their star player, Jason Tomlolo, this week. This is a big price for a team in the West Tigers that are probably the 5th worst team in the comp, and they're going off the 35 favourites. I can't be having that. Can't be having that. Even though Cowboys have been horrendous, I'll be tipping them up this week with a lot of nervousness and not much confidence, but I think the price is too big.
Yeah, okay, awesome, mate. Well, that's a great little set for the listeners there. And as we said, mate, you've been on fire, so you're liking a little push there on the North Queensland Cowboys. Bit of a wait and see on the Storm versus Bulldogs, but maybe an angle there on the points for the Bulldogs unders potentially. We're liking the outsiders with the Sharks. We're liking the outsiders with the Raiders. Absolutely fantastic as always, mate. Thank you very much for that. And from an AFL perspective, as I mentioned, really keen on the Suns, mate. I like what potentially is going to happen up there to the Blues on the weekend, and a bit of a margin push on the Melbourne Demons. So, guys, that wraps us up for the show. Thank you always for listening. As we said, you can get the rest of the boys' stuff. Logical's just starting to really hit his straps. Benny's flying, as you know. Go to the mailbag.com.au and you can follow at Barefoot Punter 1 on Twitter as well. As we always say, gamble responsibly, but more importantly, gamble to win.